Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf and to another Friday Reads, video in which I talk about the books that I've finished last week and maybe I'm still working on and started, and you know the drill of the Friday Reads. Anyway, first the books that I finished. Quite a couple of them, but that is explainable because last Friday Reads, I already had two books that I had almost finished, so yeah. So it's not that I read like 10 books this week. I didn't, because I had, unfortunately, a lot of work to do. But anyway, the first book I finished was this one, The Yield, by Tara June Winch, published, you can see, I shouldn't probably get my, anyway. We just roll with it. Tara June Winch, published in 2020 and winner of the Miles Franklin Award in that year. Tara June Winch is a First Nation Australian author. She had written multiple books, but this was my first book by her. And I read it, of course, for Aussie April, Australian Reading Month in April, where we try to read more Australian fiction, and I think everybody and their mother read The Yield for Aussie April. So you're probably quite fed up with reviews about this one. I read it as a buddy read with Brian from Bookish, and he already posted a review, so I will leave a link to his channel down below if you're interested. And spoiler alert, he loved the book. I also really enjoyed it. I think I loved it a little less than Brian, and that has to do with my obsession with plot stuff. Yeah, can't help it. Anyway, the book is told in three parts. The first is told by a white Christian priest, missionary, in the form of letters in 1914-15, telling the story about his mission and the treatment or mistreatment, I should rather say, of the First Nation people and his struggle to do the right thing. The second part is told from is in the form of a dictionary. The grandfather of the main protagonist, towards the end of his life, started to write a dictionary. So words in his First Nation language that he was afraid might vanish. And through this dictionary, through the words that he chose to include in this dictionary, he tells us his life. And the third part is present day, when the granddaughter of this dictionary writing man, her name is August, or Augie, she comes home after decades abroad. She lived in England because of her grandfather's funeral. And then she encounters people on the farm. Her grandmother lives on that farm and on a reservation, but that is threatened because of a mining company who wants to buy the farm. So there are all kinds of past, present issues about the treatment and mistreatment of First Nations people. I really loved the dictionary part. I thought that was magical. This idea of using words to explain your life, I thought was fantastic. In the beginning, I didn't get along that well with the missionary part, the letter, but that grew on me, and towards the end, I really liked it. My main issue was with the part, Augie's part. I felt that Tara June Winch is a fantastic storyteller, but not that great of a plotter. And as you know, if you know me, if you follow my channel at all, you know how much I like a good plot. I don't need a plot, but if there is a plot, it should make sense to me. And here I thought the plot twists and what happened in order to save the farm was done, at least at times, rather clunkily. But don't let me, spoil the fun of this book. It's a great read, and if you haven't read it, don't wait until the next Aussie April, but just pick it up, because it's a really important book about First Nation experience in Australia. The next book I finished was also last weekend already, and that is Louise Erdrich's latest book, The Night Watchman, which was also published last year, 2020. I have mentioned this multiple times before, that Terry from Miss Terry Reads and I embarked on this journey beginning of last year, 2020, to read all of Louise Erdrich's 16 novels in chronological order. And this is the last one. So we finished our project. The Night Watchman is set in a reservation in Dakota in the 1950s. And one of the main characters is Thomas, who works as a night watchman, but is also an important member of the council of his tribe. And this is the time of the so-called Emancipation Bill, which is, as Thomas calls it, rather a termination bill, because they want to get rid of reservations and put Indians in cities. And, you know, it's a horrible bill. If you don't know about it, I urge you to look it up. The second part of the story is told by Patrice, a young woman, 19 years old, working in a factory, looking for her sister Vera, who disappeared in a big city close by. I really liked the part, Thomas's part. I thought that was really well told. You have the typical Erdrich, a little bit of magic. You know, you have a ghost coming to visit Thomas. You have once or twice a speaking dog. If you read Erdrich, you're not surprised to encounter stuff like that. In the end, it was not one of my favorite Erdrich books, because I felt that the two very different parts just didn't form a cohesive whole for me. I would have preferred if she had focused the book on the story of Thomas, which, by the way, was inspired by the life of her own grandfather. And I felt there were too many characters introduced, and then, you know, they just dropped off the earth. The set was just a bit too crowded, and that meant that for me, Thomas's story just didn't get enough space. But still, it's certainly not a bad book at all. But for me, having read 15 previous novels by Erdrich, it's not in the top 3. Oh, and by the way, now that we finished with this project, we will take the month of May to, you know, reflect back on the 16 books, and maybe I will have to think about it, to whether I will make a video about this journey reading all of Louise Erdrich's novels. This week, I also finished 2 more books for the BookTube Prize. I'm not going to even mention the titles, because I can't talk about them anyway until the judging has been finalized, which will be end of May. So towards the end of the month or beginning of June, I can give you my ranking. I'm judging nonfiction, and we are in the quarterfinals. So we are getting close to determining the finalists. I also finished my first read for the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist. As I told you, I think in my previous Friday Reads, I'm reading the 6 books shortlisted for the Women's Prize. This one was the first, and no one is talking about this, by Patricia Lockwood, an American author, and I will make separate review videos for each of the books, because I think that's the best way to go. And just as a spoiler alert, this was not for me. It's autofiction about Twitter, and no, not my cup of tea, but I will explain in more detail and hopefully coherently in a separate review video. And then we get to the books that I started this week, or rather last week. I forgot this one to mention because I started it already beginning of the month, 1st of May to be precise, and that is My First and Only Love by, I don't think you can see that, Sahar Khalife, translated from the Arabic by Aida Bamia. And yes, it is Bamia and not, as it says on Goodreads, Barnia. It's Bamia. The book was first published in Arabic in 2010 and was released in English this year in 2021. And I featured it in one of my new releases video. This is a buddy read with Jo Smith, commentator extraordinaire, who she doesn't have a booktube channel. Nobody knows why, but she is a really, really a big part of this community, and she comments religiously, and she's just wonderful. We are reading about 60 pages in 2 days, and we are now halfway through, and we follow the story of our main character is Nidal, a 70-year-old woman who returns to the West Bank after being absent for many, many years. She's a renowned artist, and she comes back to restore her family house. But of course, then we go back to her childhood when she was a teenager, and that was just before the Palestinian War of 1947-1948, so just before the UN resolution that announced the partition. There was internal conflict, a civil war in the country. Young Nidal falls in love with a young man who then joins the revolution. And it's a book about the history of Palestine, I would say, but mainly focusing on this woman and other women. Women are a very strong presence in this book, which I always really love. So far, I'm liking it, not loving it. I have a bit of a detached feeling towards the book and the characters, but I will, of course, not pass judgment before I have finished it. And of course, the buddy read with Jo is an absolute delight. The other book that I started is for SpringAthon. As you might know, this is the readathon in the first 2 weeks of May, where you are asked to read at least one non-fiction book about nature, something in nature. There's also a group read, and I will leave the link to the announcement videos, to my TBR video with all the information about the announcement down below. And one of my picks for one of the prompts was The Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean. And I just realized yesterday that I have been pronouncing her name wrong for at least 10 years, because I always said Susan Orlean. There you go. But it's Susan Orlean. Susan Orlean is a journalist, long-form writer. She started this book actually about a real-life orchid thief as a long-form journalist piece for The New Yorker. And then it developed into a book. It was published in 1998, and I'm probably the only person on earth who hasn't read the book yet. And I thought the SpringAthon was a really, really good opportunity to finally pick this up. And I just started it, but the first couple of chapters, when we meet this orchid thief, what's his name? I forgot his name. I'm bad with names. John LaRoche. They are very captivating. So I'm really looking forward to reading further in this one during the weekend. And in addition to the books that I've started this week, I'm still making my way through a book that I started last week, another non-fiction book for SpringAthon, and that is Wendy Williams' book 2020 release, The Language of Butterflies. I came across this book by chance, really on script, and I thought it sounded fascinating. I started it and I love it. It is about, Wendy Williams, by the way, is an American author. She is most famous for a book about a horse, which I haven't read. So this is my first book by her. She's now in her approaching 70, I would say. And she, for 2 years or something, she delved into butterflies. So we learn about the evolution of butterflies, the difference between butterflies and moths, the way butterflies and moths work. I learned a lot about, proboscis. It's fascinating how they eat, how they hibernate, how they travel. The milkweed thing, one particular butterfly, the monarch, has to eat milkweed. It is utterly, utterly fascinating and really well written. And I have to say, I'm just your regular person in terms of butterflies. I like them when I see them, but I'm not seeking them out. I'm not looking for them. I don't have a thing for butterflies, really. And still, so it's an absolute fascinating read, and I can't wait to go on. I'm about halfway through, so I might finish this weekend. Anyway, so these were the books that I've finished, started, and made progress in. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, I'm looking forward to your comments, and I'm happy to report that I'm still caught up with my comments. Yeah, third week in a row or something. I'm so proud of myself. I hope you have a great reading weekend, and I'll see you all soon in the next one.